Unaware his pregnant wife was the daughter of a secret trillionaire who owned the very company where he just won Executive of the Year, Daniel Morrison stood frozen on stage as his mistress Rebecca Chen raised a hand to slap his 7 months pregnant wife Elena in front of 10,000 workers during the annual Innovation Summit. But the moment Elena Carter caught her wrist mid-swing and said 5 words, "My father owns this company," Rebecca's $3,400 Dior dress couldn't save her from collapsing to the floor, as security surrounded the pregnant woman she'd been tormenting for 8 months, revealing that the worthless secretary she'd tried to slap was actually the sole heir to a $214 billion empire. Daniel Morrison, 32, Senior VP of Corporate Development, had spent 6 years dismissing his pregnant wife as nothing more than a low-level administrative worker making $32,000 a year. Completely unaware that Elena Carter Morrison, the quiet pregnant woman in the faded Target maternity dress, serving coffee to executives, was the daughter of Thomas Carter, the secret trillionaire whose name was on every building Daniel entered each morning. His mistress, Rebecca Chen, director of strategic partnerships and daughter of a mere $50 million car dealership family, had researched Daniel for 2 weeks before seducing him 9 months ago, specifically targeting him because he was rising fast at Carter Industries. But she had no idea why he was rising. No idea that every promotion, every client, every lucky break Daniel received was secretly arranged by his pregnant wife's father as a test of his character. A test Daniel was failing catastrophically while his pregnant wife documented every moment. The pregnant wife Daniel had been betraying stood in that glass atrium 7 months along, holding a coffee tray with trembling hands, while 1,000 workers watched his mistress scream that she was a clumsy cow who'd ruined an expensive dress. But Elena's silence wasn't weakness or fear. It was the same calculated patience her secret trillionaire father had taught her, the same discipline that had kept her working as an invisible administrative support specialist for 6 years, while her father secretly owned 100% of the company. The same strength that came from knowing she could destroy both her husband and his mistress with a single phone call, but chose to wait until they revealed their true characters in front of 1,000 witnesses. Rebecca Chen, 29, ambitious and calculating, had spent 8 months sending Elena anonymous, threatening texts about her pregnancy. "That baby won't save your marriage. He's with someone who deserves him. You're nothing." Never realizing the pregnant wife she was tormenting could have her arrested, fired, and blacklisted from corporate America forever. But Rebecca's fatal mistake wasn't just tormenting a pregnant woman. It was raising a hand to slap the daughter of a secret trillionaire in front of 1,000 workers in a building her victim's father had built, in a company her victim's father had founded, at an event where her victim's father's closest allies sat in the VIP section watching everything unfold. The moment Rebecca's hand arced toward Elena's face, the pregnant wife caught her wrist with surprising strength, and those 5 words, "My father owns this company," hung in the air for exactly 3 seconds before the chairman of the board stood up in the VIP section and said, "Elena, Miss Carter, are you all right?" Before security materialized around the pregnant woman, like she'd always had a protective detail, which she had before the massive screen behind Daniel's stage suddenly displayed Carter Industries' current CEO, Elena Marie Carter. Before the pregnant wife everyone had dismissed transformed from invisible secretary to the most powerful person in the building. But that revelation was only the beginning of what happened next. But to understand how this moment destroyed 2 people in front of 1,000 witnesses, you need to know what happened 7 years earlier in a cafeteria where a struggling law school graduate made one decision that would cost him everything. Daniel Morrison was 26, drowning in $180,000 of student debt, working as a junior associate at Carter Industries' legal department, eating a $6 lunch he couldn't really afford, when a secretary in a plain blue cardigan smiled at him. Her name was Elena Morrison, though that wasn't her real last name. and she was 23. Quiet, unremarkable according to everyone who'd ever overlooked her. But there was something in the way she said thank you to the cafeteria workers. Something in how she remembered their names that made Daniel notice her. He'd been kind to her that day, not because he wanted anything, just because he was lonely and she seemed lonely too. That kindness was real. That's what made everything that followed so tragic. 4 months later, Daniel proposed in that same cafeteria on his knee between the salad bar and the soda fountain because Elena seemed safe and undemanding and content with his modest prospects. She said yes, but not for the reasons Daniel thought. Her father, Thomas Carter, the secret trillionaire whose name was on the building they worked in, had given her specific instructions on her 21st birthday. Power reveals character, but poverty reveals truth. Go into the world as nobody. Let people treat you like you're powerless. Only then will you know who deserves your trust. So Elena had accepted Daniel's proposal, signed a prenuptial agreement his lawyer barely glanced at, never knowing it was drafted by her father's legal team to protect the $214 billion fortune Daniel didn't know existed and spent 6 years conducting the most expensive experiment in human character ever attempted, watching what kind of man Daniel Morrison would become when he thought his wife had nothing. The first 2 years were good. Daniel still struggled, still worked late nights, still came home exhausted but grateful, still kissed Elena goodnight and called her during lunch breaks. But then something changed. His third-year performance review was unexpectedly glowing. He was assigned to better cases. Important clients specifically requested him. Partners who'd barely known his name suddenly became mentors. Daniel assumed it was his brilliance finally being recognized, never questioning why the firm's largest client, a mining conglomerate called Cascade Holdings, insisted he handled their legal work personally, never wondering why the CEO seemed to know details about his personal life, never connecting the dots because Thomas Carter had made sure the dots were invisible. By year 3, Daniel was making 6 figures. By year 4, Carter Industries recruited him directly. By year 5, he was Senior VP of Corporate Development and the man who proposed in a cafeteria between the salad bar and soda fountain had become someone who looked at his wife with embarrassment instead of gratitude. Elena documented everything in a leather journal, written in short Orthand her father had taught her. Year 3, month 2. Daniel criticized my appearance for the first time today. Said I could try harder with my looks. Did not remind him. I'm still wearing clothes from before we met. Year 4, month 7. Daniel came home late again, expensive restaurant receipt in his pocket, beginning to establish financial control. Insists he manage our money because I'm not good with numbers. Year 5, month 3. Daniel has stopped asking about my day, stopped asking about my dreams. The man from the cafeteria is disappearing. What Daniel didn't know, what he couldn't know because his entire understanding of reality was constructed on lies, was that his self-made success was being funded by his father-in-law as a test. Every major client, Carter connection, every smooth deal, Carter intervention, every promotion, board members receiving quiet recommendations from Thomas Carter himself. $2.3 million in commissions over 6 years. Daniel had earned exactly none of it. Then came the pregnancy. Elena discovered it on a Tuesday morning. 2 pink lines on a test she took in the bathroom of their modest apartment while Daniel slept. She told him that evening over his favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables, setting the test on the table between the salt and pepper shakers. Daniel had stared at it for 10 seconds, then said, "Are you sure?" Not excitement, not joy, just, "Are you sure?" As if she might have misread a pregnancy test. That was month 0, the beginning of the end. Though Elena didn't fully understand it yet, but by month 3, when her morning sickness made her vomit every morning, and Daniel started sleeping in the guest room, claiming her pregnancy insomnia kept him awake, Elena understood perfectly. Her father had been right. Poverty reveals truth. And Daniel's truth was that he loved what she could give him: stability, support, admiration. But he didn't love her. Month 4 was when Rebecca Chen entered their lives. Though Elena didn't know her name yet, just a phone that suddenly had a passcode, late nights that became overnight trips, a new cologne that smelled expensive. And then month 4, day 23, the moment Elena realized her marriage was over, she texted Daniel the ultrasound photo. The first clear image of their baby's face, tiny fingers curled near a tiny chin, and waited for his response. 6 hours later, her phone buzzed. Cool. Just one word. Cool. Like she'd sent him a photo of a sandwich. Elena had cried for an hour in the bathroom at work, her hand on her growing belly, then opened her documentation file and added the entry with hands that no longer shook, because grief, when it's deep enough, brings a kind of clarity that feels like ice. By month 5 of Elena's pregnancy, Rebecca Chen had a name and a face, and a pattern Elena could track like a scientist studying a predictable experiment. Rebecca was 29, director of strategic partnerships from a car dealership family worth $50 million, who wore that wealth-like armored Dior dresses, Louis Vuitton heels. A Cartier watch Danielle had bought her with the company expense account, thinking Elena would never notice because Elena was just a secretary in facilities who coordinated cleaning schedules and served coffee at executive events. Rebecca had researched Daniel for 2 weeks before making her move, targeting him specifically because he was rising fast at Carter Industries. Never knowing that every rung of that ladder had been built by Elena's father as a test, Daniel was failing spectacularly. The affair started in month 4 of Elena's pregnancy, right when morning sickness made her pale and exhausted, right when her body was changing in ways that made Daniel look at her with something like disgust. Rebecca saw opportunity in that disgust and moved in with surgical precision. The anonymous text started in month 5. He doesn't love you anymore. He's with someone who deserves him. That baby won't save your marriage. Elena saved every single one. Screenshots organized by date in a folder on her phone she'd labeled evidence. She could have traced the number in 30 seconds. Her head of security had been her father's military colleague for 20 years. But Elena didn't want to stop the messages. She wanted documentation. She wanted Rebecca to reveal exactly who she was when she thought there would be no consequences. Month 6 brought the cruelest text. A photo of Daniel and Rebecca at a restaurant Elena recognized, his hand covering hers on the table, sent with the caption, "He chose me." Elena had been in her 3rd trimester checkup when that text arrived, her doctor asking if everything was okay at home because her blood pressure was elevated, and Elena had smiled and said everything was fine, because what else could she say? My husband is having an affair with a woman who's texting me photos while I'm trying to hear my baby's heartbeat. Month 6 was also when Daniel said the thing Elena knew she'd never forgive. They'd been arguing about something trivial. Daniel wanted to go to a work conference in Miami. Elena had asked him to stay for her next ultrasound, and Daniel had exploded with frustration that seemed disproportionate until he said, "Are you even sure it's mine? You've been so desperate for attention lately. Who knows what you've been doing?" The room had gone silent except for the hum of their refrigerator. Elena, 6 months pregnant, had stared at her husband and seen a stranger wearing Daniel's face. The next day, she'd gotten a paternity test. 99.99% match. She carried that report in her purse every day afterward, waiting for the right moment to use it, knowing that moment would come because men like Daniel always push until they break something irreparable. By month 7, Elena's father had been dead for 3 months, though Daniel didn't know Thomas Carter was her father, didn't know the funeral Elena attended for her aunt in Montana was actually for the secret trillionaire whose empire Daniel worked in. Thomas had died of a heart attack in his study, surrounded by maps of mineral deposits and photographs of Elena as a child, and his last words to her recorded in a video Will had been specific. My darling Elena, if you're watching this, I'm gone. But you're not alone. You're carrying my grandchild, and you're stronger than you know. The company is yours. Use it wisely. Remember, a man's character is revealed not by how he treats those above him, but those he thinks are beneath him. If your husband failed this test, you know what to do. Protect my grandchild. Build something better. The will stipulated that Elena would take control immediately, but with a 3-month transition period for the board to prepare. That transition period ended today at the Innovation Summit at 2:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, when Rebecca Chen would make the fatal mistake of trying to slap a pregnant woman in front of 1,000 witnesses. Elena had known this moment was coming. She'd coordinated her reveal with the chairman of the board, James Hartford, her father's oldest friend, who'd been watching Daniel's career with increasing disgust. The plan was simple. Attend the summit as she always did in her role as administrative support specialist, serving coffee and refreshments to executives who earned less than her trust fund's monthly interest, and wait for Daniel or Rebecca to do something so publicly cruel that their destruction would be justified in front of everyone. She didn't have to wait long. Daniel won Executive of the Year at 2:35 p.m., standing on stage in his expensive suit, giving a speech about hard work and determination and seizing opportunities, never once mentioning his wife or his unborn child. Someone handed Elena a microphone, though she didn't see who, and she placed her free hand on her 7-month pregnant belly, feeling her daughter kick against her palm like a reminder of why this mattered. For those who don't know me, Elena said, and her voice was steady despite everything. I'm Elena Carter. My father founded this company 40 years ago. 3 months ago, he passed away and left everything to me, including the detailed reports about what's been happening in his executive suites. The crowd was silent except for the sound of phones recording, capturing everything. And Elena continued because she'd spent 8 months preparing these words. I've known about my husband's affair with Miss Chen for 8 months. I've documented 47 instances of company resource misappropriation, 23 violations of executive ethics policies, and 12 cases of confidential information sharing with an unauthorized party. I've also documented Miss Chen's harassment of a pregnant employee, me, including threatening text messages and today's attempted assault in front of 1,000 witnesses. On the floor, Rebecca made a sound like a wounded animal. Effective immediately, Elena said, her voice colder now, precise like surgery. Daniel Morrison and Rebecca Chen are terminated for cause. Security will escort you both from the premises. Your access is revoked. Your final paychecks will reflect the company resources you misused. You should expect legal proceedings for breach of fiduciary duty. Daniel found his voice. Finally, Horciaro and desperate, Elena? Wait. But she wasn't finished. I've also notified the Pennsylvania Bar Association about Mr. Morrison's ethics violations, including using company legal resources for personal matters, specifically researching how to minimize child support obligations. Yes, Daniel, I found those search queries on your company laptop. The crowd gasped. Daniel's face went gray. But here's what you need to understand, Elena continued. And now she looked directly at her husband for the first time, her hazel eyes meeting his across the atrium. Mr. Morrison, you've been telling people you're the reason for your division's success. The truth is, every promotion you received, every major client you closed, every lucky break you got, my father arranged them. He was giving his future son-in-law opportunities, hoping you'd prove worthy of his daughter. You received $2.3 million in commissions over 6 years for deals. My father's connections handed you. You earned none of it. The silence was absolute. Even Rebecca had stopped crying. 6 years ago, Elena said softly, but the microphone carried her words to every corner. You were kind to a secretary in a cafeteria. That kindness made me fall in love with you. I would have given you everything, Daniel. You just had to love me back. But you chose to love what you thought she could give you instead of what I actually could. Our child will know. Their father chose cruelty over love, ambition over loyalty, appearance over substance. That's your legacy now. Elena handed the microphone back, touched her belly where her daughter was kicking, and walked past Rebecca, still collapsed on the floor without a glance. Security, please escort these two former employees out. And someone clean up the coffee. We have a keynote to finish. The crowd parted for her like water, and as Elena walked through the glass atrium, pregnant and powerful and finally free, 1,000 workers watched the invisible woman become the only person who'd ever really mattered. So tell us, where are you watching this from? And if this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that reminds you that character is everything, that kindness matters, and that the people you dismiss might be the ones who hold your entire future in their hands.